when I tell you, my buddy's ready to retire, I can't. I'm like, let's keep working together.
So you have your.
Whether they want to or not. They're on the record as
This is my 23rd starting, and I'm on.
Let the roll call reflect that all board members are present. We're also joined by Dr. Tom Lewis and Tommy Dino. And we have a special guest, Ms. Julie Smock. Appreciate everyone making the time. This is the first time I've had a board meeting in July. So to get 100% participation is terrific. I'm excited for tonight's conversation because although we just had a similar conversation in January, bringing on a new superintendent changes things. So wanted to make sure we're all on the same page moving forward. And we'll share more about that later. But we'll start with 1.2, which is approval of job description for Chief of Business Operations and Development and a Chief Academic Officer. Dr. Lewis, will you share some more?
Yes, Mr. Zaragoza, thank you. And just as a comment on a personal note, I am so giddy excited, and I'm sure that that's not how I wanted to reflect in the minutes. But it was hard for me not to skip on my way over. This is my inaugural superintendent's meeting, and it just thrills me to know and to be able to work with each and every one of you. I just can't tell you how much I have enjoyed the conversations we've begun as we begin making a team. That being said, the first thing that I thought I would do is, first of all, thank Mrs. Neal for being here as an interim for us, and everyone has already commented on what an amazing job she's done just running the ship right away. And the same thing with Kathy Elliott, who joined us in Scott's position. And so as we looked at how deep the cuts were and the needs of the district, it became very clear to me that we needed to rethink the first two cabinet positions. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Lugo to share with us the proposed job descriptions and changes.
So before you, you'll see that there are two job descriptions. One, the first one that in your packet is Chief of Business Operations and Development. And this is a new job description coming forward. It incorporates some of the old language from the Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, yet it's updated and to reflect a little bit more of communications and visionary with marketing. Then behind that one, it's about 2 pages back, you'll see Chief Academic Officer coming before you today, and this is very much a reflection of the prior Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services. Are there any questions?
So I know we had some conversation about incorporating marketing and communications elements. As I've reviewed the descriptions, I just wanted clarification. It looks like the Chief of Business Operations and Development has a more, I'm trying to find the specific language here, but it's an externally focused role working with communications consultant or whomever. And then on the Chief Academic Officer, I see the internal communications being addressed as someone who is responsible for effective communication amongst staff. Is that the intent?
It's exactly the intent.
Okay. I like that. I think that makes sense. Thank you.
The Chief Academic Officer position is where we're going to have some robust focus on the programs within our schools, the attention that our schools need. I can't fathom having 9 schools and 4 departments And then on top of that, transportation, food services, the business office, facilities, without just barely kind of surfacing supervision. So the intention is to deepen those conversations for school support and to deepen those conversations for community and business support.
Great. I know, here's the line, right? On the Chief Academic Officer, it says develops and maintains ongoing effective communication with district administration, school staff, and community. So I think the and community, there'll probably be a little overlap. And I think that's probably a good thing, but just wanted to flag that.
Thank you.
Any questions or discussion?
Can I go ahead and make a motion?
Yes?
I move the governing board approve the job descriptions of Chief of Business Operations and Development and Chief Academic Officer effective immediately. I second.
Great, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Great, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. First one?
For you.
Our next item is just discussion. We're not taking any action on it, but we are going to review a little bit about why we're doing the work we're doing, what are some of our key policies, and then have an opportunity to really just put it out there and share with the superintendent how we like to communicate. I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to discuss these things because I don't want to make any assumptions, or I want to limit the assumptions that I'm making. And furthermore, this was part of the package that we are trying on to with ASBA as our search consultant. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Zaragoza. So what we have before you is a combination of resources that might shape tonight's discussion. The strategic plan, I think there's some sentiment among the board and maybe even some stakeholders in our community at large that we haven't fully vetted the strategic plan all the way through, but 30 people have been involved in helping grow this plan, and it's got some amazing ideas in it. It is not what we're reviewing tonight in detail, but I wanted to have it handy for you, and it does have the mission and the values and the vision statement in it, so it's a resource for us. Then after consulting with Ms. Smock on things that would be appropriate as an introductory relationship builder for us as a team, it was suggested that we review some basic policies, although these are policies that you've been living by for X number of years as a district or various board members. It helps us say what we have a shared understanding of the meaning behind them, and just helps us establish some communication patterns. So attached are 5 of the B policies that you received, hopefully in advance to study. And I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Smock so she can help us grow together as a team.
Thank you. Thank you very much for letting me come and work with you tonight. I really do appreciate the opportunity. My name is Julie Smock, and I usually, when I've been in your situation, having been a board member myself for 12 years, I kind of want to know why somebody's talking to me. Who is this person? I've never seen them before. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I just come from. I spent 30 years in the Attorney General's office. I retired in 2010. During that time, I did both licensing and enforcement work and child support enforcement work. 27 of those 30 years, I was also on the open meeting law enforcement team. So if anything has come up, anything that came up in that time period, I probably knew something about it. But I think more importantly, having been a board member and having represented boards, I've kind of been around the table, and I have a pretty good idea of the things that you have to deal with on a regular basis as board members. Although one of the things that I always hated to bring up as a board member was from older former board members to say, gosh, I'm really glad I don't have to deal with the issues I have now. Now I get it, because I'm really glad I don't have to deal with the issues I have now. But I'm going to let you just pass this around and peruse it whenever you feel like it. I also think it's important in a situation like this to have an opportunity to sort of, I hate to say think outside the box, because that's over years, but that is in fact exactly what I'm going to do. So I'll have you pass those around.
I like it.
Should be two more. Got two more?
Yeah, okay, yeah. There's a couple more.
Okay. First I have to ask, has any of you ever seen this before? Looks pretty much like a box with a couple circles, and let me only tell you, it's interesting to try to replicate it from a thing about this big in a book. But anyway, what's it look like to you? Box and lines, maybe a diagram of something? Every letter of the alphabet exists in this box.
Oh.
So, but the first thing you have to do is think outside the lines and turn it around. And if you look, you will see, you can find every letter in the alphabet. The easiest one to tip off, I've gotten this a little whatever, I'll try it out this way, is the Q, because that's the only oddball one. There's an A, there's a B, and there.
Where's the B?
The B is right here. Right there.
Oh.
One B. Some are bigger than others. There's a C, there's a D, there's an E, F, and on you go. And I had to look at it. I just kind of looked at it. I went, they are not all in there. But they are. Here's your Z. And I don't know who put this together, but just, you know, when you're thinking about things that we're talking about tonight, don't be afraid to turn it over, think a little differently. Whatever thing you use to think of outside the lines or outside the box, or just kind of free thinking. All right, now, having said that, I'm going to talk about tonight communication, mission, vision, values, board expectations, and board policies. And the mission, vision, values, expectations, and the board policies, you already have those. Although I have to be quite honest with you, knowing that the strategic plan wasn't done, at least in the usual fashion that I was used to them, I think when we talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about later, you'll be able to see whether the beliefs, the values that are in there actually match what you're thinking would be the values of your district. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about communication. And before I have you go through this little exercise, I'm going to preface this by telling you that when I was in the AG's office, after 7 years, I moved to what was then called the Economic Security Division. And one of the first things that at that point, I'd been a lawyer for 10 years. One of the first things I was asked to do was to take a communication style survey. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've moved into the land of the touchy-feely economic security people. What are they doing? Well, what I learned from that is that my particular type of communication style was 180 degrees different from the two people who were supervisory above me. And it turned out to be an extremely important thing for me to know as I made my way through the office. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is, you can pass this around, communication style survey, but wait until you all have it so that I can explain to you what you need to be doing here. This is going to test your math skills too. A little bit. Okay. Okay. As you look at this chart, you see numbers 1 through 30. Okay. On each line going across, one of these adjectives is going to be your most important, which is a 4, the one that best describes you. The next one is a 3, the next is a 2, the next is a 1, so that you have a total of 10. You can't say I'm even between accountable and accepting, so I'm going to give them numbers, you have to do 4, 3, 2, 1 in each column. And the reason is you got to end up with 300 at the bottom. So that's how you do that. So take time and go through it and just try to be as honest as you can. And remember, you're talking about how this is going to be giving you an idea of how you communicate to other people. And there are no right or wrong anything. It's just who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna put 4, 4, 4, 4 on some of them.
Across. 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4.
Might be one more.
Now, you got to make a decision. It's not to say that if you did it again tomorrow, you might not come out with a different answer, sort of like a multiple choice test. I didn't say that. Yeah, as long as you have a 1, 2, 3, and 4 across the
Across,
line.
okay.
With 4 being the
being
one
the
that's most
highest.
likely,
Okay.
most describing a view, and 1 being least.
And we add down the columns.
Yes. And you add down the columns, and those four numbers at the bottom should add together to 300. I give you great credit and kudos if you come to 300. No, geez. It's an add up to 300.
I just tell it.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. It always happens. Well, you got to be close to your numbers. Maybe your numbers. You're not, if you had numbers that you can really even all across it. You're not. Yeah, even, I know, but even if you had 2 added to 2, then you have something that can be divided into where you're coming from. Just that is. No. That may be the only one that
No one should review.
Okay, everybody ready? All right.
Yeah.
How many of you had the highest number in column number 1?
What if you're like 2 to 4 points?
Oh, you have really 2 basic styles. So column number 1 is a dry one, and we'll talk about what that means. How about number 2? Anybody have that? Okay. Number 2 is an analytical. Number 3 is an amiable. And number 4 is an expressive. So what do those things mean? One thing.
Tell me to my friend.
I'm just gonna all together. I'm so excited that I got to 300. These sheets front back give you basic information about your style, and you should have, well, some of you, I know this one is just pretty even.
Packet, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But everybody usually has a primary and a backup style. But you can have them, that's fine, you'll see when we talk about this, whether this is how this fits for you. There you go. Because what's most important about it is knowing what your style is and knowing what other people's styles are, because there are some things that irritate people to no end. Okay, did everybody get 4? Okay. Let me start out by telling you that I am the antithesis of a lawyer. I am a driver, which is okay, but I'm an expressive. The driver expressive combination is about 10%. Well, actually, it's less than that. The driver is 10% of the population. The expressive, which you are, is 10% of the population. 30% of the population comes out as analytical, and the other 50 come out as amiable. So, what does that mean? I'm a driver expressive. Most lawyers are driver analyticals. When we had this training in my office, there were about 6 of us out of 100 that fit into that category, and the person who was running the training took us aside and said, "Have you thought of a different occupation?" I've always said the expressive part came for me because I was born on the real Memorial Day, May 30th. I was born at 10 o'clock in the morning. In my little town in Ohio, they had a parade, and Dad said I was born during the parade, and I thought I was in it. On a float. Okay, so what does all this mean? We just talked to you just sort of generally about what communication does and why it's so important for you all as board members, not only to get along amongst yourselves, but to communicate with the people, your stakeholder groups. 10% of communication is words, 30% sounds, and 60% is body language. When you think about that. That means that 90% of the time people are not paying attention to what you're saying. It's, as Mom always said, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Your tone, your inflection, your body language, all those things are important. But the real question for you all is, how does communication affect your performance as a member of your school board team? How does it impact your community? I found a quote from George Bernard Shaw that I thought was really amazing. And he said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." So when there are issues that are controversial, if people have tempers flaring, communication is even less likely. So what you want to make sure is that the people in your community, your board members, your staff, your community members, your teachers, your students, understand that discussion will be held in a respectful and considerate way, while it's also informative and makes sense. Okay, so let me tell you about the different style types there are. The driver is considered aggressive. The driver acts rapidly to get results, is inventive and productive, and is goal-oriented. The amiable is collaborative. That person promotes harmony and balance, is consistent, reliable, and is a good team worker. The expressive is intuitive and creative, has a network of contacts, and is confident. The analytical acts cautiously to avoid errors, is quality control oriented, and can follow standards. So those are your strengths, but what are your problem areas? Well, the driver can think that his or her way is the best. Be insensitive to others, and can be too forceful. The amiable can be too dependent on others, can be too accepting, may have trouble taking criticism. The expressive can lose track of time, can be too talkative, and can have trouble explaining how she reached it, or he or she reached an answer. The analytical can get bogged down in details, can be too picky or critical, and can be too self-sufficient. So, I'm a driver expressive, and when I was told that my 2 chief counsel people were analyticals, I said, "So what does that mean?" I mean, I know I'm not a fact-oriented person. She said, "No. What it means is when you come in on the weekend and the first thing Ken asks you isn't how your weekend was and how your kids are, it doesn't mean she doesn't like you." It just means she wants to get to the facts, and that stuff will come later, whereas for you, that's the most important thing. The driver and the amiable are direct opposites. And I'll give you an example of that. It's again in the training session. We were asked to talk to our opposites. And analyticals, which were the opposites of the drivers, said, why can't you ever get to a meeting on time? And you know what our response was? Get a life. So anyway, drivers and ambulance are direct opposites. You're too slow, you're wasting my time versus you're manipulative, you're trying to take advantage of me. The analytical and the expressive are direct opposites. You're moving too fast and you don't have the facts versus you're too task oriented, get a life. Again, another example from my true life. We were looking at candidates for assistant attorney generals and we had not had a good string of luck for the last 2 or 3. I'm sitting in a meeting with a bunch of people who are all analytical types. And I said, and I'm an intuitive, expressive intuitive. They said, what do you think? And I said, I think you got to throw them up in the air and the first one that you can grab you should hire because you aren't making any sense. But well, that didn't go over well. But about 6 months later, they said, gee, you know, we need to change the form. It's not working well. I said, I didn't. Analytical, expressive, you're moving too fast, you don't have the facts, you're too task-oriented, you get a life. Under stress, the amiable needs to feel appreciated and trusted. And this is important because this is when you're getting into real nitty-gritty stuff, whether it's meet and confer or it's dealing with budget issues and you're having to cut programs or people or whatever. These are the stress things are important. The driver needs to be in control. The expressive needs to talk and feel accepted, and the analytical withdraws because in a stressful situation, you don't have time to do all that fact-finding. The most difficult thing for an expressive intuitive is to explain to someone why, when you ask me a question and I give you an answer straight up, if you're an analytical, you say, how in the world could you possibly know that? You don't have any facts. And I say, well, then I know I'm right. But if you ask me how I got there, I have to really work hard to tell you. So by the time I say A is the answer and you say you don't have any facts, you get your facts and I will back into it and we both come to the same conclusion at that time. And that's my life. It's the intuition piece, which makes me impulsive in communication, makes the expressive person impulsive. Doesn't mean they're wrong.
Which
but
one's intuition?
Intuition is expressive, usually.
Expressive.
Yeah, it's that too. There's a cartoon, Far Side cartoon from way back when, that has a glass of water, an 8-ounce glass with 4 ounces in it. Okay. And the amiable says the glass is half full. And the analytical says the glass is half empty. And the expressive says half full, no wait, half empty, no wait. What was the question? And what does the driver say? Hey, I ordered a cheeseburger. So, you can look at these things. You know each other's basic types. You know where your strengths and weaknesses are. Now, I will tell you that sometimes your communication style in this kind of a setting may not be the same as your communication style at home with your children. I had a very analytical driver type chief counsel, but when he wasn't working, his wife did everything for him. She picked out his clothes, she did everything. She laid him out for him every night, all that stuff. He didn't care about doing that there, but he needed to be in control of the office. So kind of keep that in mind. And again, this is just something to consider when you're talking about these issues, and might give you a little bit of a heads up as to why some people need a longer time to get to the same point where you may be as others, and why, in my case, I'm a great idea person, man. I'm the little prince looking out over the planet, and I can come up with more ideas than you can shake a stick at, but do not ask me to implement them because that is not my concept. Because that requires factual stuff and steps and process and the board. So the good news is that you guys have a great mix. I actually did a training session with the board, 5 board members, superintendent, 2 assistant superintendents. Every single one but one was a driver. And don't you know, they had long discussions and never got anything done because they were right. And it isn't, the nice part about it is you can't change your style. It's not a good thing or a bad thing, it just is. But you can change your behavior on a temporary basis to communicate with someone that you know has a completely different style. And again, I'll draw another experience for me. This same assistant chief counsel I had, Kim, was temporarily put in charge of child support enforcement as their director when they were in between. And I had to have a meeting with her as I was her lawyer instead of she was my boss. So I know how she is. She writes everything down. She's very fact oriented. So I wrote down on a legal pad. I wrote a bunch of stuff on a legal pad, put it down in front of me during the meeting. I never referred to it at all because it was all up here in my head. But at the end of the meeting, what she said was, "Thanks for being so well prepared." Well, I accomplished exactly what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted her to think that I was prepared, and I knew that just coming in and having no notes or anything would not work for her because she would think that, you know, I should be able to do things the way she did. So there are ways that you can use this.
Julie, I would be curious what everybody's secondary style is, because I do think there is a blend of, you know, not just a one style. Is that okay if we do a
Absolutely.
round robin about that?
Whatever.
What was
Go
your
for it.
secondary style in it?
Amiable.
Amiable.
Yeah.
Okay. What was yours? Yeah, mine was driver as a secondary style.
What was your first one?
My first one was expressive.
Okay.
Okay, my scores for the first three are 75, 79, 77.
Yeah.
Take your pick.
Right?
So which one is the odd man out?
What do you mean?
Which is the weakest?
The weakest would be the first one,
The
the
driver.
driver,
Okay.
but they're all within 4
Mhm.
points.
Mine was kind of the same, and the one that I'm the least is analytical.
Do you feel like that fits?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it fits for me. And I gotta tell you, my scores are like 80, 80, and then like 40s.
So Jeannie, between driver and expressive, what would you say would be your secondary style?
Well, expressive is 82 and driver is 81. But
Yeah.
but in reading this, I personally feel like I identify more, at least in work situations. I hope, right? Like I hope I am more of a driver, but I feel like I'm much more expressive at home with my family.
Tommy, or yours?
Amiable.
Yeah. It's interesting, we have a real strong pattern of amiable in our secondary styles. Yeah, that's helpful,
Well,
isn't
that's
it?
collaboration.
Yeah, that's a neat pattern.
That's very cool.
It really is very evenly distributed when you blend them all together.
Before we leave this topic, let me go back to something that's happening here. I talked about the stress a little bit, but and I said you can't change your style, but you can change your behavior in a given situation to maximize the delivery of your message. And I think it's really important, and I certainly spend a lot of time talking to my children about this, even now that they're in their 30s and off on their own. What is the purpose of your communication? If my son is irritated with his father and he's telling me he's gonna send off this ripping email, my first question is, what's the purpose of your communication? Do you just want to vent? In which case, go for it. But if you're trying to get him to change behavior, that's not gonna do it. So you really always have to keep that in mind. What is the purpose of your communication? If you're a driver, don't throw a bunch of assumptions without information about how you arrived at them to an analytical. If you're an amiable, take advantage of your trusting nature and let the expressive talk. I found this in the New Yorker magazine. I don't know how long ago. It's been a while. There's no date on this, I can't tell you, but this is a column called Shouts and Murmurs in the New Yorker magazine, and this is a series of letters that were sent out, or that they concocted as being sent out by a school district about illnesses. I'm just going to read one of them to you, but think about it in terms of what it is you're you know, what this would send out to parents and why it don't work. Dear parents, Jimmy Lewis, one of your fifth graders, has been glowing in the dark. It is not known at this point what the cause of this condition might be. Investigators from the Atomic Energy Commission believe it may be related to a science project, an attempt to develop alternative energy source for his electric train set. Jimmy apparently obtained a small quantity of tritium, which is used in nuclear weapons, from an eighth grader who participated in this spring's field trip to Moscow. A few helpful hints. If your watch or pacemaker stops every time you're in proximity of your child, or if your child's been reading in bed at night with the lights off, then he or she and you may be radioactive. In this event, wrap first your child, then yourself in lead foil available from any plumbing supply store, and drive to the nearest nuclear decontamination center. Also, be sure to affix the large sign to the front and rear of your car that says "Warning: Hazardous Material." I'll read one more because I really like this one. Dear parents, Greg Zorthian, one of our first graders, is resting comfortably after getting a little too cuddly with Creighton Tarantula, one of our homeroom mascots. It seems that Clinton doesn't like to have his tummy rubbed too hard. Please be advised, however, that Clinton seems to have gone missing. According to the helpful people we spoke with at the National Arachnid Crisis Desk in Louisiana, tarantulas are natural hitchhikers, so it is possible that Clinton might have caught a ride home in your child's knapsack. You might want to have a poke around and see if he's under your bed or in the kitchen counter. If you do find Clinton, you can disorient him temporarily with a quick blast of a fire extinguisher, or if Dad is feeling game, he can try to coax him into a glass jar with a dead mouse or any handy household arthropod. We're looking forward to seeing you next week on Ebola Awareness Day.
Ebola Awareness Day.
But you know, you gotta think when those things come out, and you have to act quickly. Make sure you are a really good PR person who's able, or community relations person who's able to put information together in a way that isn't going to scare unnecessarily or poke fun at something that isn't funny or whatever. Okay. We're going to move over to mission, vision, values, but I knew it. This is it's the right call. Oh, okay. Well, okay. As long as it's different from the rest of them, we'll be all right.
Oh,
You got it. You know, to talk about your vision, values, you really have to pay attention to where you've come from. So I want you to just take a few minutes and just write down on several different Post-it notes. The question is, what is your heritage? Just one or two word phrases. What's the heritage of the Creighton School District?
The district, not personally.
Yeah, of the district.
And when you're asking heritage, do you mean cultural heritage, ethnic heritage?
Whatever comes to mind, and if you want to do 10 things, it doesn't matter. We're going to put them up here and just kind of see if you have lots of the same thoughts or different thoughts.
One idea per sticky?
Yeah,
One
it's
idea per
easier.
sticky.
Yeah, it's easier that way to put them up. And then we'll just, when you're finished, you can put them up on the board or give them to me and I'll put them up on the board for you and just kind of see where they are. I know your district is old comparatively. I mean, the Peoria district just had 125 and you're
We're 130.
Yeah.
We were figuring that out today, weren't we?
yeah, they just Peoria just celebrated 125.
1886.
So,
1884.
Right. yeah, Peoria 1889. I'm surprised. And you're going to keep all of this because it's a public record. Not that we're getting into that tonight. You're making public. That's a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
There's actually a half-day free seminar on open meeting and public records. When you're done, you can put them up there and we'll see if we can group them, or if you want me to put them up for you, I'd be happy to do that.
You want to put them together for your life?
Yeah.
Do you need it, do you want a piece of tape or you got it?
Are these not Post-its?
Oh, yeah.
They're getting
Is that one? Well, you can put it anywhere. We can try to see one that's similar. Oh, okay. Well, I think I saw your name was supposed to be. Great.
I all the sleds there, I hope.
You did?
No, we go in. It did rain one day. We were there. I was right here while we were there. And very flexible. All right, it's wet too. Believe me, I was looking forward to some cooler weather. Not to be. Couldn't be there. All the community. I'm sorry. I'll come back.
Yeah, I have diverse stuff and diverse stuff. Oh, well. I'm sure the person that had the.
Can you have them up? Well, we've got some real consistency among all of you. Here are 5 historic plus Creighton Schools 1880 founded. That would be historic, I think. So 6 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 diverse. Getting better than that. We have community and partnerships. I'm not sure if those are same or not. Not what whoever said partnerships. What were you thinking of the community, or were you thinking of something else?
Yeah, I just recently read a document from 50 years worth of, little, thank you, Donna. My eyes are crossed. But I really have noticed a really amazing partnership with different civic organizations and businesses over the years. So I threw it out there as, something that's not brand new to us, but something to invest in and who we are.
There's family important, caring, inclusive. Whoever put inclusive, was that intended to be like diverse, or is that something different
I
for
put
you?
inclusive because I felt included in everything since I've gotten here, and I've only been here 2 weeks, and I feel like I've been here for a long time.
Then we have
Yeah.
change. You've got several in here that are divided, disconnected, not cohesive, changing north versus south. Does that make sense to all of you as an historic issue?
Middle school, no middle school.
I'd like to hear more about it.
When I said divided, I was thinking kind of, you know, the north and the south and the difference between the needs of, or the
Is it
wants.
Economic?
It's cultural, it's economic, it's privilege, you know, there's a bit more privilege in the north, I would say, than in the south.
There are a lot of things we kind of just popcorn, but I also was thinking about looking at who, like, the electorate and who's registered to vote does not match at all in any way, shape, or form the student body and our families. I think it's something like 24% or so are Latino in our electorate, but 85% of our student body is Latino. And to me, there's a huge disconnection there. And it makes me wonder, where's the rest of the community and where are their kids? And are they just older, or do they go to other schools? I don't know. So there's some questions.
And you also have, like, there's not all, I don't want to make that generic assumption, but there's an underlying racism where you have the Hispanic or the newly immigrant versus the other people over here who are really white. I was reading something, one of the studies from 2006, that was before 1040. And it was interesting, a lot of the Anglos, what they were worried about in Creighton, or what their assumption was classes taught not totally in English. They didn't realize at the time, the law was you had to do totally in English unless you were in a foreign language program. They didn't even know, but they looked at the color of the skin of a lot of kids going to Creighton and decided they're Hispanics, they're talking Spanish in class. They're looking at some of our teachers who are Latino descent and deciding they're teaching in Spanish. There is an underlying racism within. You have, like, Suzanne, never get her last name right,
Schweiger-Nichols.
Yes. Okay, she was on the board for ages, but she lived over in the Papago area, and her neighbors complained about our communicator, which is a newsletter, and it comes out, you have an article in English and you have an article in Spanish. Her neighbors were complaining that the district spent money putting the Spanish, you know, so you do have that with some of the old, I call them old growth, that have been here forever, and they're white, and they are somewhat racist against a lot of our new people coming in.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we have built more threats with foreign language, because I remember a survey where on that survey, when people were looking at Squaw Peak and what they wanted, what they didn't want was that marquee to say Escuela Squaw Peak. So to your point,
Yeah.
I agree.
In the history I was reading, it even said in 1977 that the parents of Squaw Peak wanted their attendance area reboundaried into Madison. That was one of the discussions at the board meeting in 1977.
Oh, they wanted to become part of the school district.
There's some consistency, because I don't know how much has changed, like with that middle school question. I also put, like, disconnected, meaning I feel like in the last several years, like, we had big challenges in 2008 when we were labeled the only billing district in Arizona, and we did a lot of, I wouldn't call them radical, but like some very aggressive changes that forced our campuses in a different operating procedure, work more as a district. And before that, what I hear, and I wasn't around for it, was we were 9 islands doing our independent, separate things. Leave us alone. So that's also meant by, I think that's the heritage I don't really know, but that's the heritage I walked into.
Some of the things that are included here are child-centered. Tradition's important. Desire for a better life for the next generation. Challenges. You have challenges? No. Not any school district in Arizona. Proud. Agricultural.
Because there used to be a lot of agriculture in this area, so when you said heritage, I thought of how, and that also has kind of affected how our neighborhoods were broken down too. You know, you've got the really nice kind of lush irrigated neighborhoods, and then interspersed in between that, you've got like, you know, low income apartment houses and things like that. And I think a lot of that is a direct result of how everything was zoned and the agriculture that was here for such a long time.
Are you pretty much built out within now or not?
Yeah, it's filled in. So
Landmark,
I don't know
is that
about
what you mean?
Yeah,
Landmark.
well,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not gonna have an influx of growth that's gonna cause you to need to build new schools and.
There's space within the facilities that exist here now. We could probably handle 1,500 students and be fine. 1,500 more students and be fine with the current space that we have.
Yeah, they're still doing those.
Yeah.
There's,
We were 1,400 students more 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago.
Something like that, yeah.
But I do think people are moving into this district. Because there's a lot of empty lots, yeah.
People moving back into the centrals.
it's easy, it's convenient.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
exactly.
things.
Solid, solid.
I didn't. So, like, it's easy to get lost in the weeds, and I hear about the challenges that we have because I'm a school board member and people harass me at the grocery store. But coming here from Isaac District as a teacher, where I didn't have textbooks, and we're talking about curriculum adoption, right? Like, I didn't have textbooks, support, calendars. I was totally all on my own, and like coming here seemed like a dream. And I didn't hear that from some new teachers. So I think like overall, despite our challenges, we have a solid program. We have things that can obviously be better, but it's solid and it's in much better condition than most school systems across America. And you know, work across America, I know these things, and don't want us to forget that we're pretty solid.
That's good to know. So, can you build on these heritage things as you move forward? That's really, one thing she was talking about for registration. That's something you want to kind of build into curriculum or whatever. I know that there are a number of districts that have voter registration boxes at their school offices, and if somebody comes in to register their student, and give them that, they can fill it out or go online or whatever. But all of these things, because it's your heritage, you have to build them. You can't kind of throw them out, even if you think maybe they should go. But okay, so the next part of this is for you to again go to your Post-it notes and tell me what are your strengths and what are your challenges. Broad, kind of broad in the district.
Okay.
Strengths and challenges. And just let me say, I'm going to assume that everybody wants to say budget as a challenge. I get that. But what other, and it has to be huge. I mean, it's a big part of what you have to do anyway. But what strengths and what are the strengths of the district? And they can be repetitive. Some of them might be repetitious of what you put in here. I mean, if you think your diversity is a strength, then you can say so. You could think that some things are both a strength and a weakness depending on how you do them. Don't be afraid to say that either.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, put that one down
Yeah. Because sometimes it's,
She didn't.
Your events book.
Of course you will.
I didn't notice it has stored the kill resolution in the budget.
Very courageous.
Absolutely.
The big correction, that's Mr. Edwards.
That's
Strengths and strengths.
whatever, so I can keep you straight.
No, they're just under strengths
So I
and,
just put all straight.
Yeah. I haven't done anything, you guys can, did you see the logical placement?
Thank you. Good, thanks.
Oh, it's good. It's just challenges. I like talking. That's all right. I've got tape.
He said he didn't want to push you out of there, so he just pushed all of his on there like a flower. Very gentlemanly. Don't tell me that she's 3 documents got my eyes crossed. So guess what I did after? I start looking at
Walking the wall.
I did that too, but that's a normal day.
Okay.
Yeah. So I also looked at the national timelines and the timelines. So I've got this whole thing going.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be fun. Truly. Major events that's going in the district.
If you look at this screen, and go, well, it's meaningless. But if you look at it with the literature and the art and political, what's going on, and so much you could picture, you can understand some of the literature, some of the music, the art. And that's- Yes,
Sorry, we're sidebarring. over here.
Oh, yeah.
Historical timelines.
yeah. They have a whole thing.
Okay.
Oh, you can't have it. This is okay. Well,
Okay, for the strengths, I see veteran talent, community parent involvement, caring staff, great kids and families, friendliness of employees to consumers and community, focused on student needs, override and bond support by voters, strong community, then it says here and there. Who wrote that? What does that mean?
Here and there, strong community, like the parents and community gets together, but not everywhere, just like pockets of it here.
Got it. Does everybody understand what she's, I don't want to go ahead of you. Because I want to make sure you all understand what everybody else is saying here. Hilda.
You got the shout out.
Again, just passed 2 overrides, community support, staff, work ethic, small district, being a small district. How many students?
About 6,500.
Long-term employees. Some of these have both strength and challenge, so I want to wait talk about that. More staff, functional school board. That's good.
That's deserves some apology.
Should not be discounting.
Or taken for granted.
Beautiful up-and-coming neighborhoods. Ready to move forward. Child-centered. Diversity. Teachers are able to do so much with so little. An old district, long history as a strength. Willingness to innovate. Awesome board superintendent.
Well, whose handwriting?
Carl and I wrote that.
Okay. The challenges, and some of these, I'm going to go through the ones that are listed as both challenge and strength because I think those are really interesting. New upper administration as both a challenge and a strength, and I think that makes perfectly good sense because you just can't have a brand new person in the CEO role and not have
And a full team around her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a loss of institutional memory,
Mhm.
you know, and things that we just grease the wheels and they keep moving, but could be disrupted and, you know, yeah, it's a good one. I didn't write it, I just think it's a good one.
So the key for you guys then is to make sure that you don't make assumptions that she understands something that maybe she doesn't because she hasn't been here. That somebody else who'd been around for a long time would have understood. That makes sense that it's both. It's both. Confusion on no or go middle school. You all understand? You
It
do.
was actually north and south.
Oh, is it? It looks like
But it worked the way you said it too.
Yeah. That's the intuition.
Yeah, it was your intuition. Yeah, well, and what was interesting to me, again, I just have this fresh history in my mind, is that the middle school debate has been going on in this district for 40 years.
Yeah.
I can tell you almost every 7 years, there's some sort of decisive or divisive conversation about to middle school or not to middle school. And I didn't realize that. I've not seen that in another district to the same degree.
Oh, I lost that down Peoria in the early 90s.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, only because I came from, in Ohio, it was a 6-3-3-7, and it just made sense to me that you could have better equipment and stuff for science labs and computer labs and stuff. But the reasons that people didn't want it were unusual. Some of them made a lot of sense. One of the biggest ones was the opportunity for more kids to have leadership opportunities in all of the K-8 schools versus 3 and 4.
But they did do it in Navy's here, the enrollment went across.
Right. Well, I think Deer Valley did it, and then they've come back. But there were also people who thought that the good reason not to do that was because they didn't want their kids to be involved with sex, drugs, or gangs.
There's a national
doesn't
flight
matter.
of the 6th grade kid. There's a national funny flight that happens in the 6th grade.
Well,
But I find it interesting that it still seems like it might be possibly on the table and to be discussed and should well be.
Well, one way to do it is to kind of have junior high, middle school type programs in that same K-8 or whatever it is. And
You wrote budget up there.
Right next to that one, right?
because I knew it was one. I knew it. Okay. Creighton reputation is listed as both a strength and a challenge. Because
Creighton, if people investigate or their child has gone to Creighton to one of the schools, usually they're very satisfied. And but a lot of people take the Creighton reputation and they don't investigate and they view Creighton School District as a negative, that we don't have the academics, that we don't have the good teachers. They'd rather go to Scottsdale. And that's the biggest flight we have. It's not Madison, it's Scottsdale schools. The biggest flight there,
Anybody?
or charter.
And that brings me to the next one, which is both the challenge and strength of competition, open enrollment and charters.
Similar, yeah, same,
Right.
yeah.
Families living in poverty is a challenge. Makes sense. Language barriers, disconnect between community at large and district.
This goes back
So
to
that-
like the voting and, I mean, we were able to get enough people to vote yes on the override, but that was a very small amount of the electorate, because a lot of people aren't even voting. I just think people are largely disconnected. They don't have the data 100% to back that up, but
Did you look at the presidential election? Because that was an off election too. It wasn't usually people vote more in presidential times.
Right.
Well, actually, the further we get into the years, we're gonna find more and more Latino voters registered only because there's lots and lots of initiatives happening in the state each election to get Latino voters registered. I know personally. People who do it.
Reactive without producing desired results is one.
That was me. I feel like that, especially with the whole No Child Left Behind era, there's a lot of, and it's not just Creighton necessarily, but there's a lot of reactive measures without necessarily waiting to see, is this going to produce the kind of results that we want? And when it doesn't, within a year and a half or 2 years, it's like, all right, let's throw this out and let's try something else. So, and I mean, in my personal experience in Creighton District, over the last 8 years, that's been a problem. And I think it's not, like I said, I think it happens in other districts too, in education in general.
25 years ago, the word was pilot program.
Yeah.
Lack of interracial cohesiveness is a challenge. Agree with that? You understand the meaning, not really agree or disagree, but understand. Teacher recruitment and retention.
It's huge. It's a crisis.
Legislation feels punitive, not supportive.
it just feel like it's-
Current president of the Peoria School Board and voted for the override said Peoria was hemorrhaging good teachers. And I think that's probably true.
Yeah, great phrase.
Don't welcome teachers or do enough to keep them.
That's me.
No, I want to make sure everybody understands, is there anything you want to add to that?
I was just really, really sad this year to find out some of my oldest friends from the district, one with only 2 years left before retirement, is leaving the district to go to another district after 28 years here, so.
Another challenge that's listed as no alignment with high schools. Do you feed into more, how many districts you feed into? Just finishing?
And Scottsdale, I mean, Arcadia
not
is some of
maybe
it.
officially, but I know some of my neighbors, like, they think in their head their feeder is Arcadia, and they will figure that out.
Mhm.
Is it because it's closer or?
It's wider.
Equidistant.
It's wider. It's wider.
It might be.
Wanted
Points
people
for
to be
Arcadia.
open and happy to read. Yeah, well,
You might
that's
be.
not much doubt about that.
Well,
And once kids say that's where I'm going, that's where they want to go with their friends. There's a syndrome there. Go to school with my friends. So if 4 of them are going to Arcadia, 40 of them will go to Arcadia. That happens.
But when parents say it,
Yeah, oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
System/process. That was yours.
Yes, it was.
What did you mean by that? It's a
School district is
challenge,
made
right?
up of, yes, it's made up of systems and processes. And I'm not saying that this particular one, but in any district or any big organization, systems and processes are very, very important because you need to understand what happens in one part of the system when you mess with another part of the system. And then making sure that you follow through with processes and don't go around them. So, I haven't seen it happen. I just know that that is a challenge in many organizations.
That's that analytical process step stuff that I just think someone needs to deal with because I can't, but that's why you need to. Yeah.
Makes me whole.
No alignment with high school is in here again. White flight from public schools. Disconnect between community at large and district, that was listed before. Awful charters in our boundaries.
Yeah.
They're bad.
Meaning bad academically, not providing kids with the educational needs.
Well, I didn't write this one, but I just think of the conversation nationally and statewide on the promise of charter schools, and we don't have that here. Like, they're not actually like a competent competitor.
We've been scrutinized by, the powers that be, looking at whether their charter needs to be revoked.
Like,
At least one of them.
they're not like Great Hearts or Basis or one of those brands.
But they have really great flyers that they send to my house.
It's like a 40% vote rate in the state.
Do you have students who have come to you from charter schools? Do you see,
I mean, I don't know what the numbers are. I've heard from.
are they behind, I guess?
Or they weren't so worried about this charter threat because they'll maybe check out that charter because it's something new and exciting, and then 3-4 weeks they come back. The bigger concern is Madison Scottsdale, Alt, I guess, and Phoenix Elementary for a little bit, Osborne, the district schools.
And other charters,
The 101 day.
it's I told you that.
Yeah, the 101 day.
The pattern that we observe for is the ADM for the.
Right, it's a big article in the paper about that.
Yeah, it's going on all over the state, what the charters might be accused of doing is that in some cases, the public school districts will see a huge influx of students coming back to the districts on the 101st day.
Do we have any data that tells us who we're losing or and how many children are going to the charter in this district? Or how many? All the apartments and stuff. It would be hard to gather how much you know what a community is.
I mean, I think we could easily, disenroll your child or whatever, you're supposed to fill out paperwork when you withdraw, yes. There is nothing that says where
and why, yeah.
In order to get back, we have to know why they're leaving. And in order to learn that, we need to know where they're going.
Usually if you get them in the first place. So I'll just like other families, my daughter's 4.5, we got one right here preschool. We're looking at Creighton. But like there are other families and we're at Little Big Minds, right? But everyone's already like staking out schools across the valley, private, public, charter, where their kids are gonna go. So like we can only get to that data if we get them to kindergarten
In the first place.
But you can serve it in community too, I mean.
It can be very expensive to do that in the country.
I might be able to do something on social media.
This is a marketing piece, right?
Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Anything else anybody wants to add to the strengths and challenges?
I just appreciated the alignment of the voices at this table relative to the issues. It was not like, it's my issue, it's my issue. there was a really good pulse around the table of shared concern. Nice.
I think it's like, when we did this in January, we just kind of talked about it. I think this was a better way to facilitate the conversation and see it visibly.
It's efficient.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julie, that was good.
Have fun figuring out how to write all this down.
Can you capture this kind of in a columns?
We'll make it into columns.
Oh, yeah, you can,
Right, yeah,
whatever.
thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna do this. You don't have to write anymore. The next question that goes along with this, and this is all leading to get to your mission, vision, values, and your expectations is, where do you want to see the district in 5 years? Now, this is obviously part of the strategic plan, but what do you all want to see? Based on the things you've already talked about, maybe completely different ideas. And you can write, you don't have to write them, you just throw the ideas out and I'll write them down.
So I want Creighton to be, I don't want to go first.
Say one thing and then pass it.
So I want Creighton to be like a premier, like viable choice for every community member in our district. I'm less worried about folks from other communities who might drive in, and we're happy to bring them into our fold, but I want to make sure that for the Creighton community, that this is a premier viable school choice. What that looks like, I've definitely thought about this. I think 5 years is probably ambitious, but I would like my wife to feel confident in dropping my daughter off in any classroom in the district. We're not there.
Equity among the schools. I know it's been a very top priority of the last administration but you still have inequities in various parts. At least even in the public, the schools might be equitable, but the public perception of it is not.
Is that in terms of physical plant or teachers or student body? What are?
You just said it. I'd like my wife to drop my kid off and be safe and be able to in any classroom in the district. That means they're not equitable, at least in your mind at this point.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, right?
Yeah.
She still has that question about Monte Vista or Biltmore, where we live, right? And even within those schools, there's only certain classrooms where she just didn't know enough about it.
Yes, that maybe that's to bump off that and what I was thinking. The community, the Creighton community, and we have neighborhood schools, but if they choose Creighton or not, let it be an informed decision. Let the community know Creighton. You know, I choose Creighton to send my kid to, or I choose something else to send my kid to, but I have educated myself about the Creighton schools, the neighborhood school.
So that means from your end that you have to have that, whatever that information is available. These schools are all A schools, they all have whatever, super teachers, they have small classrooms, they have facilities. That's the reason I asked whether it was a facility thing or whether there was something else, because it's always a problem to bring schools up, and it's more of a problem in a district that has a lot of new schools in it, because you have half the district that's old and half that's new, but this is more quality of education.
We have a lot of low income communities, so some of the schools that are closer to there might not be schools that everybody wants to bring their 5-year-old to, quote unquote. And it kind of leads to what I was about to say, is that 5 years, I'd love it to be a great district for low income at-risk children who typically would become dropouts.
You're talking about
The hood? Hoods. So low income at-risk children who typically become dropouts are still being dropouts in our district. And 2 of them robbed me terribly. I mean, they tore the house and tore everything apart, and they were only 13, 14 years old. So there's something we can be doing, I think, a little bit more for
some of those kids that, end up in jail, things like that.
Yep.
They don't have, but they both served 2 years.
Back to the equity question, like part of this is, the school board made the decision to invest differently, to build more prep, and there's a fly program, foreign language. And so it's perceived as there is more attention, more money being directed to that school at the expense of poor brown kids who have less political representation. So fair or unfair, like that is that's an equity issue that I feel frequently comes up in conversations I have with community members and staff.
I'd like to piggyback on that too, because I was going with equity, but I was going with equity and program access for all students.
That's cool.
Yes.
You were kind of shaking your head. What were you thinking?
I don't think that, I mean, that area up there knows about the fly program and maybe some others, but yeah, in South Phoenix, they really don't not care. Our south area, it's more equity among the schools if they want the fly program, want to do it, but I don't think they really look at that area that much. I don't think they really care. They're still working on surviving. That's not on Glasgow's level.
I think for me, something that I feel very strongly that many of our students need, especially in the south part of the district where maybe they are living in poverty or have experienced some kind of trauma, we need to, I think, really address those kind of traumas that either have happened or ongoing or whatever. And so it's not necessarily, even though the state wants us to think that our kids are only, as good as their test scores in math and reading, I feel like we really need to do a better job at really looking at the whole child and addressing the needs of the whole child behaviorally, with wraparound services and all that other stuff. But those things can't go unaddressed. And I don't think we're there yet. I think we have some good partnerships though, right? With the Release the Fear and some of the other things that we do try to do, and partnering with, I think, Southwest Behavioral at times. So we do the best that we can with what we've got, but I think there needs to be a movement in general in education where we start looking at these kids in poverty, not just in Creighton, but in every district, and paying attention to the trauma that they've gone through.
So when I think about 5 years, I think I definitely don't want us to chase achievement as defined by test scores. Like I want our kids, I talked to Donna about creating a profile of like, what does it mean to promote from Creighton? And what does that mean for our kids? I know with some of the strategic plan conversations, there's some language about multiple languages. I want something realistic that is not like, I do really well on the tests that change every 2 years, but more like I know how to solve these problems. I have I have my ability to, I don't know what it looks like or how to articulate it, but I want something more realistic and not defined by, I don't really care if we're an A district, B district. I think some of that stuff is important, but critical thinking, critical and creative thinkers.
Well, and I want them to be prepared for any high school they want to go to. Realistically, go in there. We've got the algebra that we're starting, but I think we're a little bit behind in that. That's my perception. I think that's perception of many others too. It may not be a reality, but I don't think that they're as prepared as some of their peers.
I'd like not to worry about the budget not balancing.
The district budget?
Yeah, kind of like having enough money.
That would be nice.
I mean, years ago, we'd have it twice to talk about budget. Scott would come in here, he says, this is, now it was, within the last 4 years, it's been like almost monthly, every 3 weeks or so. You know, we have this change, this has changed, so we're getting more money or we're getting less money, but we can do this, we can do that, we can play a show game a little bit, and we're okay. Before we had a lot more enrollment, before 1070 and various other things. And so we were more solvent. Flush. And so, and I'm sure other schools in the same situation.
Is it reaching too much? You said in the next 5 years, but is it reaching too much to say that the schools could be the learning center for the communities or a hub for the communities? And
That's great. Like Wilson, that would be great. Wilson, they're great. School is open pretty much all the time, and it's a community center. That would be awesome.
Playground, I mean, the basketball court, and the whole.
the computer labs, the library.
And Roosevelt's working on that too. Conversation didn't go very far when we started that a few months ago.
Superintendent of Wilson.
I mean, there's like one public park in our boundaries that I'm aware of.
Is that all?
We got right here on the 32nd and like south of Indian.
You have one.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There are
28.
Oh, so leave it
No,
on
that's
Madison.
not
That-
our
that's-
local leaders in Madison.
There's one by Billmore Prep, but that's in Scottsdale. We have one, as far as I can tell.
Perry.
Oh, Perry. Mhm.
Amy.
Oh, yeah.
32nd.
So, yeah, the idea that this is a safe place for not just our students, but like the community center. I don't know what it takes or what it looks like to make that happen, but I'm interested in it. I don't know if that's my #1 focus by any means, but
Gotta keep those classroom dollars in the classroom though. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Well, this is the kind of thing that really looks at partnerships outside, like city council, you know, whatever.
Law
other
enforcement.
big law enforcement, but also businesses that are here, or, you know, big businesses that have a presence here that can contribute things.
You know, I mentioned in the update that, you know, as we look at the strategic planning document and the process that the folks have gone through so far, that perhaps we look at a town hall. And I'm thinking about the merger, because, you know, Eric's worked really hard with a team of people to build in community engagement into the document, and it's all good stuff. And I think if we were to ratchet it to a conversation with the various leaders you each know, you know, along the lines of what Julie just recommended, that we could take this conversation to maybe the level of, you know, full neighborhood, you know, commitment.
That's what'll bring the safety feeling that my child will be safe, my child will be educated, we can guarantee these kind of things will let you out of here if we have.
One of the big things that those community was they want teachers that do or seem to care about their child. And then they want them to teach, be highly effective teaching.
You know, this is the kind of thing that you get somebody like, here's my brain, Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper has his whole rock up in Scottsdale. He's got a business downtown, because he did on the soil. Alice Cooper's. Yes, that's the kind of thing he does. I mean, he has that open, so kids who would otherwise not have any place to go can go play music.
He's not the only one. There's a lot
No, I'm
of-
just saying,
Yeah,
that's
there's a lot of
that's an idea.
Latino leaders in the community. Just check into Telemundo or this.
Well, we'll keep this conversation stirring.
Yeah, this is a good one.
Get a business to sponsor a security guard.
any more of the 5-year? Besides the usual, we want enough money to be the best district in the state, and with every other district in the state, we're all the best.
Well, I'll add one that, because I haven't chimed in on this particular one, but I would really like learning to be fun. And I hope that's not too namby-pamby, but it just, I think we've gotten so militant about skill development and test preparation that we've forgotten the joy of learning. And if I could help shape that culture, and that was not just considered as, you know, touchy-feely, but it's seriously thoughtful, creative learning is challenging and fun, and rigor can be fun. It doesn't have to be militant. And so I would really love to see that that's where we are in 5 years, is that I love coming to school.
Yes.
I'm happy when I'm at school.
So I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I've toured some schools in low-income neighborhoods where they have the more militant, disciplined environment, where in one school in particular, kids were forced to put one hand behind their back and the other finger to their lip.
Yes.
And no. But
I know
like,
that walk.
I've seen it before.
It concerned me. I'm like, what do you, why, like, tell me about this. And like all the staff were on the same page that they thought this was how you train and teach this population. I'm like, I don't live here. Like, well, why that doesn't happen here? So I just wanted to advocate and say I appreciate your statement about learning.
Thank you. There's going to be a delicate balance as we move forward, because when you go through a period of time of being a failing district, and a highly structured approach comes in to centralize 9 separate schools into a school system, it comes with some, here's how we do things around here, and a tight sense of non-negotiables. And simultaneously, you want academic freedom and joy, and the teacher's brain loving what she or he is doing. So, you know, if there's a way that we can all get behind whatever's tight and whatever's loose, I'd really like to see us begin those conversations, because in the long run, as a teacher, I'd stay in this business longer if I had some autonomy. I mean, that's a huge part of my definition of empowerment. And so it's fun for the teacher, and it's fun for the kids. And fun's not a light word.
Hold you to it.
You got it. That would be a fun task.
It's hard actually as a teacher, it's hard to make it fun and learning at the same time. And even if you're just trying to focus on fun, that doesn't work. Because
Yeah.
then they're like, oh, wait, I'm not learning anything.
Yeah,
I don't think it says the focus is fun, but the process could be fun.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then sometimes kids learn, they know that they learned something in the activities.
That's true.
So I just want
The
to
trick
honor
is
that.
And teachers are so creative if we just could let them be who they are, you know. That would be, that's right. And give them the time to plan. I heard you in that. I got that. Message received.
I asked one of my kids' teachers one time when I was a board member, and I thought there were all kinds of things they were being asked to do that made no sense. This was 25 years ago. It's even worse now. But I said, how do you deal with all that? And she looked at me and said, I shut the door and I teach my kids.
Yeah.
Okay, I just learned something.
We will not have a rubric for fun. Promise.
Don't repeat that, James.
It's on tape. It's right there. Read my lips. We will not have a rubric for fun. Okay, Eric, sorry, create, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But if I did, it would be very fun.
I think he's got to.
I know.
Okay, we're gonna talk about policies, but you wanna take a 5-minute break, stand up, stretch 10 minutes, whatever, and then we'll talk about your policies and.
Yeah.
gives the marching orders to Dr. Lewis about this is what our policies are, and we expect you to implement them, make them work by delegating and doing whatever you need to do to make that happen. And you have another policy, another discussion policy, which we're going to talk about in a minute, a different statement about it. But this just talks about your general responsibilities. Your executive powers, you basically are delegating, you delegate them to your superintendent. So you set policy, she administers. That's your job. You do the policy, she administers. If things aren't going well, it rolls up to her. That's where it goes. And that's where, and that's why you are, you are tasked with hiring her, evaluating her, doing whatever you need to do, because if she's not evaluated, then she doesn't know whether she's doing things the way you want them to be done. That gives her a benchmark, and it also allows you, I think, to grow and hit those 5-year marks that we're talking about. This is the appraisal function, is obviously these two fit together. Efficiency of operation, that comes with, are you spending your budget dollars? Are they being spent the way you said that you wanted them to be spent, and are you getting the best bang for the buck? But it's also, this is extremely important, evaluation of your educational programs. And again, that goes a lot to the evaluation of the superintendent. You've asked for a program to whatever it might be, and at the end of the year, you expect to see certain steps have been taken. That's how you find out whether she's doing what you've asked her to do. It's not a day-to-day kind of thing. So I don't know what processes you have in place or have adopted in the past. The delegation to the superintendent is, that's really what causes most problems in school districts, is if board members want to do what the superintendent is supposed to be doing in terms of an org chart. So we'll talk about this a little bit on the next section, but if you have a parent who calls you and says that a teacher did something he or she shouldn't have done in the classroom, you're not supposed to do that. You need to get that to move it up the chain, whatever that might be, whether you feel more comfortable taking it to her or going to the school principal or telling your neighbor who called to do that. That's what you do, that sort of thing. But I don't know, what do you have in place? Do you have an evaluation instrument in place? Mm-hmm. And is it something that you're going to be looking, because you have a new superintendent, you're going to be looking at changing or at least evaluating again?
Yeah, we have a new evaluation tool that was adopted a year ago. We've now run it one cycle and identified a number of opportunities for improvement. But I think equally important is we need to just, as a board, work with Dr. Lewis on the specific goals that go in there. Like there's a framework, but I think we need to actually talk about what it is that what would success look like for academics, for students, the strategic goals. Because I know we had a number of questions. We just weren't on the same page when we did the evaluation last time, and want to make sure we are all not making assumptions amongst our own understanding of the tool, plus the superintendent should have a fair chance to understand what success looks like so that you spend your time appropriately.
We had an evaluation instrument one time that was based on a 1 to 5, with 5 being best, and a board member who didn't believe anyone should ever get a 5, which was a problem because the other ones thought we should. Those are the kinds of things you have to make sure you're all on the same page. You all know what the scoring really is about.
And importantly, like if we're talking specifically about the evaluation tool, like we should, as a board with superintendent, talk about the purpose. Is this a tool we're using primarily for accountability? Is this primarily to refine the program? Is this primarily to, I don't know, whatever.
Communicate feedback, mutual feedback is one of the things I know you talked about as a team.
Yeah, or is it like primarily the vehicle for the performance pay? Like there are probably elements of all of these things, but what's the primary purpose? And we have to do that first, because otherwise it clearly influences our inputs and what goals are and what success looks like. And it helps the superintendent know how she chooses to spend her time. Right?
We'll agendize that for August and make that one of our big conversations, and if we need another study session on it, just because I know you had a experience with the last round where it wasn't quite where
You agenda, yes.
you wanted things, yeah, so. People have done, so.
When I started on my board, the superintendent evaluation had things like speaks well in public and dresses well. Fortunately, he was a really good superintendent, so. The second part of your board powers and responsibilities deals with individual board member duties and obligations. Basically requiring that you be knowledgeable about laws, regulations, and policies. That with regard to other board members, you act harmoniously, impartially, and support the majority. That you recognize and keep confidentiality, particularly executive session stuff. That you act as a representative of the district, and this is what I was talking about before, that you refer complaints that you may receive to the appropriate place. And you know, the real problem here, especially in the area of personnel, is that if you get caught up in a, you know, somebody complains about a teacher, and your next door neighbor says this is the best teacher my kids have ever had, and what are you going to do about it? You put yourself in a position where you can't be objective and impartial, which is required for you if you have a hearing, whether it's you do the hearing or you have a hearing officer, you still have to be completely impartial and objective, and you can't do that if you get all this information. So, you know, plus it's a whole lot easier for you to just say, hey, the law says I have to be impartial and objective, so I really, it's not that I don't want to help you, but I can't. You need to take this wherever it needs to go.
Well, we can take it. We don't have to tell them I can't do anything. You have to take it.
Well,
We
you
can refer.
you
to the
refer it to the right, yeah,
Right.
rather than stepping in a classroom and saying, aha, right.
Or not even the principal, actually.
Well, you know, it really is going to depend on what kind of a relationship you have. You know, I always get to say it's my favorite thing to happen again. Any single time I've ever had a conversation, I've been able to say, this is the lawyer, it depends. And it always comes up. It really does depend on the circumstances. If it's your kid's principal and you know them well enough to be able to say something, or you don't think it's a big deal, that's fine. But if you've got a neighbor who's saying, you know, there's some really bad behavior going on the part of this teacher, you need to get it to the district office as fast as possible so that the proper steps can be taken, whether it's police or parents being contacted or whatever it is. But you really, you have to have, it's tough because I know it's tough because you have all this information and you have to keep it in perspective and trust that the work that your administration is doing is going to take care of it properly. And if it isn't taken care of properly, that's where the evaluation piece of the superintendent comes in, or that administrator, or whatever it is.
Yeah, but only if we put that in the superintendent's evaluation tool.
Do we have a process identified for doing it?
I always take everything with superintendent.
We don't have it, actually,
It's
I
not
don't know if
written.
it's written policy, because I didn't know about it when I first got on board, and someone approached me about doing a mural in Loma Linda, a mural group, and so I just went right to the principal, and I just never heard back. And finally, I stopped the boy, and she said, oh, no, just so I'm like, oh, I never knew that, nobody ever told me.
Yeah, we do have a policy on staff approaching board, and it's supposed to go through a chain of command,
But
which
nothing on
makes sense,
board.
but I don't know if because we can govern ourselves however we want. The previous boards have not given us guidance
Right,
on that,
so we don't have a policy.
but I think, I take it to Dr. Lewis. And she can
Yeah, we
figure it out.
recently had a threat in our neighborhood with a woman who, and I didn't in the neighborhood, a woman who was harassing children coming home from school. And one of the child happened to be my ex-husband's son, not my son, but his son. And so instead of me getting involved and calling them, I told my ex-husband's wife, you need to sit down with the district, let them know about this woman, or at least the school. So,
Yeah, well, you know how in the last paper, it said for the executive function, we delegate most of that to the superintendent. The question is, like, because I don't want anyone to even have the idea that I'm going to necessarily follow through, like, I want to work through my channels. Like, what do you want us to do if we have complaints? And complaints could look like too many kids in my classroom, or it could look like I think there's some like drug dealing in the back of the school or something. Do you want us to go to those like schools, like the principals, or?
Like, for example, drug dealing, I tell my neighbors to go call the principal, they're on the scene. Yeah, this makes immediate. You don't want to have to go through chain of command, no offense, but you're over here, Loma Linda's down the street a couple, 3 miles. You don't want to have to go from you down to finally call the principal. If I was a parent and somebody did, I'd call the principal directly.
So I think the difference in the 2 points of view would be, would you call the principal for that complainer or that advocate, or would you counsel them on who to call? So in my answer to your question, it would be, you advise them to speak directly to the most flat level as possible. If they're upset with the teacher, coach them to talk with the teacher. If, the most healthy relationship is right at the lowest level possible. And then if they feel they're intimidated by that or bullied by that, then coach them to talk to the principal. And then I think it would be appropriate for you then to call and say, hey, I have a neighbor who I advised her to, or him to, and then you kind of give me and then I decide, well, I better call the principal and say, how's that going? And so we kind of have a two-way thing going. Your talk is to me, but your talk to your constituent, if you will, is to teach them the chain of command. That's kind of right.
well, and if it's illegal, like drug dealing, you should call the police too.
Yeah, it's safety.
As a citizen, yeah, not as a board member, yeah.
Well, there are certain, it's happened for me several times throughout my tenure on the board where, because of my connection as a teacher in this district, people feel comfortable reaching out to me and saying, look, this thing happened. And they don't feel comfortable going to their principal because there's feeling that they're going to be in trouble or get targeted. So in those circumstances, I've always just said, look, this is, I appreciate you telling me this. Do I have your permission to forward this to, Dr. Boyle, Dr. Lewis, and if they say so, then that's what I do. Otherwise, I say, go back and, if you don't want me to say what's going on to the superintendent, your other option is to do this. But I understand when some people don't feel comfortable talking to their, so is that
absolutely
sure? Okay.
That's
Yeah.
usually where the big problems come up, is when you have a teacher who has a concern about a principal and they can't take it to their principal because that's the person.
The fear.
yeah.
And I hope that wouldn't be the dominant case, but it is on occasion the case. And I would want to know that too, because that's not okay. And I think the other thing that might be in the air every now and then, and I don't have any stories, but I wonder if it's rumor management. So if there's I'm hearing this, the sooner I can learn about that, the sooner I can investigate it, the sooner I can get back to you about its validity and or its need for containment or correction.
Another way to put that is no surprise.
Yeah.
Either to her
Both
or-
ways,
or-
right?
Exactly. That's really the
It all
key.
depends too on safety.
Absolutely.
I had kids, Loma Linda kids, and it was a hoot. They picked the wrong door to bell. They were selling stuff to go in a truck, door to door. And I'm going, what school did you go to? They told me Loma Linda. And so I'm asking them all these questions. Are you approved to do this? Does your parents know? Does your principal know? And they're going, yes, yes. And I'm going, well, that's funny. Your principal didn't say anything about this to me. I'll have to ask her. And they just, I go, look, girls, this is a pretty safe neighborhood, but you little girls, go home. Please do not, and I had to step in because it was a safety issue for the girls. And I said, no more doing this and all that. I told Dr. Boyle, and I didn't have to tell the principal due to the fact that I scared the girls and they fessed up to the principal the next day. But it's like, sometimes you have to look at the situation, you have to look at the kids. If it's a safety issue, you gotta act sometime. And it's not as a board member, it's a community member.
Next policy is BEDBA, which is board superintendent relationship. Obviously, you have to establish policy. We've already talked about the fact that the superintendent is your CEO, and your policy specifically allows her to delegate responsibilities that you give to her to others as well. And you've already talked about you need to relook at your evaluation. But again, that's really key to superintendents knowing whether he or she is doing what needs to be done according to the board, because you guys set the policy and she's supposed to administer it. So she's not going to know if she's administering it unless she's got benchmarks, whatever you want to call them, in an evaluation.
Yeah.
Other than dress is nice and
Well, I think what's important about this one is that as the board, we focused on a bigger picture, and that the superintendent is the chief executive, and it's in our policy, the superintendent is the one who's responsible to carry this out. And superintendent may delegate some of these authorities down, but it doesn't, in our own policy, doesn't give the board the authority to redelegate or say, okay, superintendent, I want you to work on these things, but I'm going to go to this group or this consultant. Like, it should go through the superintendent. I just want to make sure if we didn't like that, we talk about it, but that's kind of how we are organized right now.
One of the things I think that is helpful, would certainly be helpful to Dr. Lewis, being new to this position, is as board members, what have you seen or observed as the biggest roadblock in establishing a strong relationship with your superintendent? With a superintendent? What have you seen as roadblocks? What information can you give to her that will help her out? Is it just communication? Is it openness? Is it?
I'm fairly new to the board, but I've been coming to board meetings for a while, and it seems to me that, I don't know if it's a habit or just how the board has been comfortable in the past of not asking the superintendent her opinion on things. And perhaps these things go on behind closed doors where, as a general public, you don't see it. But I always wanted to hear what Dr. Boyle thought about something. And it didn't seem like that was often asked during board meetings. So I'd like to know your recommendation and your thought on things that we're, about to vote on.
It's usually very hard for me to share that opinion, isn't it, Tom? I do have a real hard time.
So I mean,
Was that expressive, number one?
Prior to our board meeting,
yeah.
with the board chair, the board president, and the superintendent. A lot of discussions.
Well, I think in my experience, I know Dr. Boyle always tried to give as much attention to any board member who was interested. I don't think there was a disproportionate amount if you were the board chair or clerk or anything, but maybe. But what I recognized when I was on the board the first year, I had like the same 30 to 40 questions for Dr. Boyle, then they get them answered. The next 2 weeks it was the same thing. Just like put them in the presentations up front, because I also felt compelled to add to the public conversation that happens here that didn't used to get videotaped, but there's a public political dialogue. And if we're not asking those questions up front, it might appear that we don't know what we're doing or what we're talking about or that we've done our research. And I finally came to the conclusion, I'm like, oh, I don't want to surprise anyone. I'm not trying to play the gotcha game, but Dr. Boyle, I need these answers, what do you think? Great. Just so you know, I'm gonna also ask these questions when we get out here. And it might not be for you, it might be for Dr. Lugo or whomever is presenting. Will you please make sure everyone's prepared? Because I wanted it to be part of that conversation publicly, even if I knew the answer. And I feel like that's a good practice. I feel when I go to other board meetings and you don't see that, people are scratching their head. It's not easy to follow. The board agendas and minutes are not necessarily comprehensive or easy to read. And I feel personally compelled to have a more transparent, complete picture about the political questions that we're grappling with. So sometimes I'll ask the same question and I definitely know the answer, but it's not always for my own purpose. It's for the public record.
I think, public perception, if I know that if people feel like decisions, they come to a board meeting to speak and they feel like decisions have already been made, that's extremely frustrating. And many times research has been done and you feel like you have made a decision, but I think having that conversation in public, especially if you have community members concerned about a certain item, I think it's important to kind of have that, even if you've had the conversation already, to have it again so that people understand why you're making the decision.
Yeah. I mean, to Amy's point, like I'd love, like what we already do is we get the information from our key leaders in the district who are sharing their points of view. We generally have a discussion. If there's community who wants to weigh in, they do. And at the end of the day, like things happen when the chief executive knows this is what it's going to take. This is the opportunity cost. These are the pros and cons. This is connected or not connected to our strategic plans, etc. And I would love the superintendent to not just share that with me when I ask at our regular meetings, but like after we do this, like, so given where we're at, where do you recommend we proceed? Because at the end of the day, like the evaluation will likely be aligned to the big picture, not just in the moment what we care about, but the big picture. And I think the superintendent is best positioned to weigh in. Obviously, there's still like we have to vote on that, but I think it's helpful for the public conversation. And then there would be no like pre-arranged. I don't want there to ever be ideas that there is something already agreed upon behind closed doors.
Before I was on the board, I definitely felt that was the perception I had, and I know I wasn't alone in that. So,
Well, going back to your strengths and weaknesses, you all said as a strength of your community. So what you're saying is that transparency with the community is important. You keep community members as a strength.
right.
Yeah. And I want them to see how the board works with superintendent and not try and, I mean, we're not going to be on the same page all the time. And the board, the five of us are not always on the same page, but I think it's important to put out there up front that this is what we're all thinking about. This is why we're thinking the way we're thinking. And I think adding that component would be helpful.
I don't know where this is something that I've gotten from ASBA, I don't know where it came from, but it basically talks about relationship trust and key behaviors and that. And this would work both with board superintendent and with all of you with the community. Talk straight, get to the point, demonstrate respect, consider the worth of each role, and acknowledge that value. Asking for her opinion. Create transparency. Right wrongs, acknowledge mistakes, show loyalty, speak as if people were present. That's it. Deliver results, get better, confront reality, address the tough stuff, clarify expectations, put important expectations into policies and goals. It's really, that'll be key. If you decide to make any changes here, or you do it as a goal setting part of your strategic planning process, whatever, you need to be really clear. So, there's nothing harder if you've been in any kind of organization than having a moving target. It's really hard.
So what was the point? Address the tough stuff?
Yeah.
Meaning?
Confront reality, address the tough stuff. Meaning, don't be afraid. If you have a problem with the budget or something, to say, here's the problem. We thought we were going to get $2 million and we're only getting $1.5 million and we got to deal with it. And then practice accountability, evaluating yourself as a board as well as the superintendent. Listen first. Be amiable so you really know how to do that. The drivers in the room, not knowing.
I'm analyzing that.
Yeah, I say, did I say that? Keep commitments and extend trust. Give people an opportunity to display trustworthy behavior. Anyway, those are things that I think, again, your policy is very general, but you've certainly mentioned some things that you may want to build on. Next one is EG, which is your policy process. Okay, that policy basically gives you guidelines for the board, tells you that your policies are your guidelines for both board and district functioning, and we've already talked about that. But you have a very strong statement in there about other than board members having the opportunity to make suggestions for content. And the question that I had when I was looking at this is, do you have a process in place for that? How do you do that? Is there a process? Do you expect people to say something and call it public? Is there a form that can be used? Do you expect community members to bring something to a board member who then brings it up? But you do have, if you look at your policy, you have a very strong statement about suggestions about the content of policies may originate with a member of the board, the superintendent, a staff member, parent, student, consultant, civic group, and any resident of the district. So you might want to think about, and it says a careful and orderly process shall be used. So do you have a policy for that? And if you don't, you might want to think about adopting something. Again, that goes to the support of your community that you all talked about as important, that you've got support in your overrides and that sort of thing. It helps people be a part of the process, feel like they're, making a contribution in that regard.
Wouldn't a process would be referring to the administration for study? Next line.
Yeah, but who? I mean, that's good for you guys. But what if I'm a parent at one of your schools? What do you have? Some places, is it on your website? Is there some way I can know? Maybe I don't know a board member. I don't feel comfortable, and I don't really want to come to a meeting because I don't want to speak in public. But I have an idea or I have a concern. How does that get communicated to you? Is I guess the question I'm asking. I don't know the answer to that. That's for you to think about.
I mean, we could take it however we want. Like, if it originates from a parent or a civic group, they must connect with the board secretary to fill out the form, or even call the public. But I think the question that is being raised by Julie is, we're not sharing what that looks like if someone in the community wants to do this. And if it's something that they value, that's an opportunity for us to help engage and bring community in.
That's fine, but we should be getting the end result. It shouldn't be the beginning.
Well, I think it may originate with a member of the board. That's the first one.
Right, but I'm talking about community or other people. So we should not be the beginning. We should be the end. If they have an idea or something like that, this is some study, and then we get recommendations because we should not be we should be the end product, not the beginning.
Well, I think it doesn't say we can't be the beginning, but I hear you on the middle piece.
Like
Initiating the idea is what you're saying, yeah.
Well, if somebody in the community or a teacher or something like that, like she said, has this great idea, and they shouldn't be coming to us. They should be going to the administration, study according to this, study or recommendations. You all talk, and then we get your recommendations on whether we wish to act on it, not us being the beginning. The administration should be the beginning contact going through
Well,
that area.
but sometimes too, though, I think that people will, like, for example, and I think this was with us as a board, we got like a letter or something from the kids who want to play basketball.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they brought it to us as a board. So I mean, I guess my point is, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but I do agree with you that, like, you know, but then it needs to be reviewed by the proper.
Which is
Right,
what
and
we
it
did
did,
for the
Roy
students.
did it.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Made recommendations.
And he made
But I wouldn't want,
recommendations.
I just wouldn't want to scare people away from them. I'd love to
No.
see more people come to board meetings and give us suggestions.
Oh,
you know.
yes.
But I understand what you're saying now, that you don't, you know, that then they can present it to us, but then it has to go through a public.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
I 100% agree. We need those
Yeah,
recommendations.
we're not
from
gonna do
the superintendent.
Right, absolutely.
And I think in general, there are a lot of people that are intimidated about talking to a principal, even parents,
Yeah.
not just teachers. So the board is a good place for people to maybe email if they don't want to speak in public. But I wonder how many, I'm sure teachers all know, but a lot of parents don't even know what the school board does. So, you know.
Yeah, or that they are in a position to influence, or I mean, in this case, initiate
A conversation.
a conversation.
Yeah. So we could probably be better at communicating that to our community somehow.
Yes.
I do like the idea of a policy inbox, you know, like
I know.
on the website, and just being able to, hey, you know, why don't we have this at this school? Can we have strings or
Right.
something, whatever it is. I like that.
Julie, does the regulation determine, if the regulation spell out, this is policy and it's general, but a regulation could define the process for it happening?
Sure. Or you could amend the policy to be as specific as you want. Let me use the example of board agenda setting. You have districts that have the basic policy that ASBA says the board does it with the superintendent, other board members can adopt it, can ask for something to put on the agenda and such. But in some places, it's become extremely political, and it may be 2 pages worth of, you know, it has to go through this process, and you have to have a future agenda items on your board agenda and get approval for it, and I mean, it's extremely complicated. So it's this policy, the most important thing for you to keep in mind, this is yours. You can do whatever you want to with it. And with regard to initiating or not, you know, it's really kind of a mixed bag. There are some things that you actually have to do because the law requires you to do it, so it isn't, you know, somebody else initiating. But I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying there are different levels of policy, but if you're going to have as strong a statement as there is in there about, I think it's pretty strong, who can initiate policy, then it would make sense if you were able to say, when somebody calls and says, how do I do that? The answer shouldn't be, I'm not sure, I'll have to get back to you. You should know what it is.
Yeah.
If you're going to have it in there, or take it out, if that isn't what you want.
And I definitely want to honor what I heard from Donna, which is making sure we have it run its channel through the
Right.
superintendent,
Right.
cabinet, or whomever they may delegate, which we already discussed in
Right.
previous things, so that we have informed recommendations before we take action.
And you may find
And to
that,
Tommy's point too, right, like, we don't know what, in this big system, what decisions we make on one thing that we think is so easy, how that impacts the rest of the system, and that's something easily forgotten, I think.
you may find too that a lot of the questions or suggestions that come in are things that have already been decided, that the administration would say, well, that the board decided that at their last meeting, and here are the minutes, and this is what the decision was. So it isn't even something that needs, as you said, not to get to you, because it really isn't even a policy issue. It's more of a operational kind of question. So, okay. This one is VA, and this requires you to have an awareness of community opinions and attitudes, so it kind of fits in with the last one. You know, how do you do that? There are obvious ways. People come to board meetings and speak to you. You see my turn pieces in the newspaper, or letters to the editor, or whatever it might be. And I don't have any idea of how you do that, but just know that this is a policy. And it also says that you have to shorten long-range strategies. That's your goal setting that you've been talking about in the strategic planning. So you're in that area, but awareness of this is a tough one. I mean, especially if you have a community that's varied, really varied. So, but you should
keep your ear to the ground and
Yeah.
kind of have an idea of the kinds of things that people are concerned about.
I mean, I think of like part of this too, which you didn't put up here, but to me, it's just a reminder that we represent the people who own these schools. That's our community members. It's not people in Madison or out of state. And so our number one priority, I feel like I do think about this frequently, that we are representing the people of Creighton District, and that's who we should be responsible for. So I bring all those ideas that I hear of back to the superintendent.
Well, and I'm listening to the shared concern that we don't really fully represent the full district, and that it's going to take a real concerted effort to do that if we're not getting candidates at the next election that are more, residing in the southern part of the district. So in what way are we connecting with the southern part of the district more? It's going to be a real concerted effort, and we'll put that somewhere in our strategic plan. And I think there's already been some really good ideas generated on how to do that from the group so far.
And this is, this is all part of that finding the goal setting piece that we're going to be dealing with at a later time. Okay, the last piece of this policy is this agenda prep and dissemination. Superintendent in conjunction with the board president, superintendent alone, if you've given her that authority, has the ability to put things on the agenda. That's extremely important, because if you go on the ASBA website and you look at all the things that are required to be done during a calendar year just because of federal and state regulations, she has to have that ability. She can't rely on you guys. You don't want to have to be the ones to remember all the different dates for all these different things, and it's an amazing list. I had no idea it was that bad. Now, you also allow other board members to put items on the agenda. The question I have is, the policy doesn't say they will be put on. It just says they have to communicate to the board president and the superintendent within 5 days. I don't know if that's an issue for you guys or not. If it isn't, no big deal. You get it to them and they say, we'll put it on, or can you wait till the next meeting because we're working on it and we're not quite ready, that kind of thing.
We have to select.
Will we have a future agenda?
Yeah, no, the orange. So future agenda items.
So,
Well, that keeps us at task.
the way it's working for us, Donna, is I feel like everyone has been able to add an agenda item when they've so desired, and then the role, like the superintendent and Hilda plays a critical role here, and the board president is, when do we actually hear that and make sure that it's part of, this meeting's going to be super packed, or I think it makes sense to have this conversation after we have this conversation. So I don't know that we've had any challenges about someone's item being heard in a timely manner, but I just wanted to share that, because when I read this here, it's like the superintendent with the board president approves the agenda, and that means that the items might come at a different time. Is that your understanding?
Say that again.
That
Chronologically. Superintendent, Hilda, basically do the agenda. President sometimes will switch the agenda around because of the need to.
That sounds right.
You guys are in a great position because you all seem to get along. There are districts where the agenda setting process becomes extremely political, and a board president has the ability to keep items off the agenda that a board member wants, whether it's a fear of getting he or she doesn't like, what, I don't know. But I can tell you that when I was doing open meeting law work a long time ago, we had a complaint from about the Paradise Valley Town Council. There was a council member who could not get whatever item he wanted on the agenda. So at one of the council meetings, at call to the public, he left his seat, went down and ran to the microphone and spoke at call to the public and said, I don't know why you won't let me put this item on the agenda. So the Attorney General's office has said, and it's not really right, because if you look at the definitional sections of the open meeting law, at a board meeting, when you're sitting as a board member, you're not really a member of the public, you're a member of the public body. But
that's how bad it can get. So if you, I mean, what it does is absolutely in the long run is it takes the focus off kids' educational issues because people start maneuvering and getting political. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about are the board expectations. First one is leadership on student equity. I think this is extremely important that you have this in here because you have that all over your heritage and strengths and weaknesses. So you're right on target for that being an issue for you. You talked about diversity, you talked about equity, you talked about the need to deal with the issues that are different in the North and the South. And it seems to me that that's right there. And obviously you have a lot more on this statement that you have, but this one I noticed really fits in well with the things that we talked about earlier. I don't know if you're feeling like you're hitting these points, or these are things that should be if they're not in the strategic plan as it's eventually adopted, but
yeah. They didn't originate in the same place. So I'm curious.
I just wonder, you know, if I show up to one of the schools to visit after I talk to Hilda, and I show up in my cut-off jeans and tequila sunrise tank top with no support garments. No problem. You know, I'm
just get a picture of that for continue. I want to worry about
making me nervous. I'm not meeting expectation number 2,
and
the last one. What is my consequence?
So when we adopted these, and the purpose of having this conversation, and this is part of this conversation, is to make no assumptions with incoming superintendent. But I think when we came together as a board, like we have different styles, different things that brought us here. And this was a way for us to help synthesize who we are, what we stand for, and put out messages, especially because we were anticipating a superintendent search. I don't know if there were necessarily consequences, but it was a matter of these are shared agreements that kind of helped to give us a North Star. I remember when I started on the board, Hilda gave me 2 thick notebooks like this, and these were the board policies, and I'm like, what, right? But this kind of captures all of that for us. Like there are other policies, but this helps me focus. So like me as a processor and a thinker, this was super helpful. And I know that when we've had decisions, we've come back to this.
I figure a lot of it, if you're not following it, you really shouldn't be on the board. You shouldn't need to be reminded of it. You know.
Yeah,
Well,
but
but
assumes everyone.
But there are some people who get on governing boards for reasons that are different
Yeah.
than
Oh, yeah.
you know, you and I. So at least the thing that I like about this is that this document, if you're like, 2016 is coming up, maybe I'll go and run for the Creighton board, because this is online too, you know, so you can see, oh, I have to be professional, forget it. I'm not gonna, you know, whatever. I mean, like whatever the thing is, oh,
Yeah.
equity, no, I only care about the north side of the district. You know what I mean? So at
Right.
least then it kind of
I think somebody, you know, if they only care about the north, they still might run.
sure.
They still might be unprofessional and run.
But it sends a
But
message
still,
already. Of
Yeah,
this
but
is what
there's-
you're walking into.
that's what you're walking into. That's your expectation, but you don't have to meet them.
Yeah.
Well, you still get paid if you don't do it.
I know. But no.
it
it's
does
just-
help in your operating as a team, which is really what you are, because as you know, you have no authority as an individual board member. You
Right.
only have authority as a team. So if one member is constantly engaging in unprofessional behavior and the rest of you are kind of ignoring that person's input, even though maybe it's good, then, you know, it is a problem. I mean, you really have to look at yourself. You are a team. The 5 of you are a team, and the 7 of you are a team. I mean, different aspects, but you're all a team, and you're working for the education of the students in this district. And
I think these are value statements that I thought would be important. And I don't know, Donna, I'd love to hear your thoughts when you were vetting us as a potential district that you wanted to spend a significant amount of time with?
Definitely.
Well, my first impression of the expectations was that they were quite sophisticated and a really great compass for, what we call in the classroom, professional learning community, and I equated them to norms. So, when we learn together, we say, well, here's how we're gonna learn together. The teaching team, the third grade teaching team will sit together and, one person will kind of behave a certain way, and the team goes, hey, we all agreed we'd be on time, or we all agreed we'd turn off our cell phones, or we all agreed we'd get to the core of the issue and not dance around it, or whatever the agreements are. So I saw them as agreements or norms, and I really liked them and I was attracted to them. To the point that I'm kind of hearing Ms. Young speak to is it's, that it might feel a little, just like teachers when they're in their PLCs, they're like, well, of course I'm going to turn my cell phone off. Well, of course I'm going to show up on time. That's insulting that you would say, that's how we have to write it down. But there's something to the norming practice that makes some of even the basics a review. And I have a feeling, having worked with, I want to say this, 2 boards that did not have norms, that did have distracting behaviors and did play more internal political games, that for me, this did feel to some degree like a synthesis of professional practice. I found it attractive, but I don't want it to ever be, perceived as anything, less or an insult to anybody, But I found it attractive.
Well, I mean, so like, we're a governing board by definition, right? There are other school boards that are boards of trustees. And like, when I think of number 3, why it was important for us to discuss it was demonstrating leadership and authentically engaging our diverse community. There are trustees that I know who feel entitled and empowered to make decisions on behalf of their communities because they are trustees, not because they're delegates or representatives. Then they go back to like, but the trustee, the definition is like, I have more access to information. I know all this policy and the stuff that isn't always in the public. And I didn't want to be a part of that type of board. Like, I was excited to be on board with others who felt it was important to hear from community members. So that's why, like, for me, putting them out there, these were value statements too.
So number 3 is your leadership in engaging the community. Again, a lot of the stuff you talked about already. And the fiscal oversight versus, diverted budget and assets. A lot of that is statutorily required. You guys are the ones who are responsible for making those tough decisions. But again, when you're looking at this, when you're looking at the strategic plan, you're looking at all these things. And there's a lot in here. There's a lot in here. But I will say to you that absolutely, if you model the kind of behavior that you've got an expectation to, then you will get the same kind of behavior from your community group. And if you have a tough situation, a tough decision, people tend to self-police when they know, you don't misbehave in a meeting like this. This is a group of people who want to hear what everyone has to say and make thoughtful decisions after hearing all this information, and they're not going to tolerate screaming and yelling and carrying on. That's the biggest benefit. It allows you to do a better job.
There was one thing that I had mentioned when we were making these that is just, I don't see it anywhere unless I'm not finding it, and that is governing board members' commitment to being developed themselves, professional develop themselves, attending professional development, that kind of stuff.
I don't remember this.
Yeah, and see that because you can't just come into, maybe some people can, but I couldn't, even though I had years of children in the district, come into a role like this and just know everything off the bat. There's a lot of development that needs to happen, a lot of classes and a lot of workshops. So 3 years later now, I know so much more than I did at day 1. A lot more hours more. So I don't see that anywhere in the expectations to try to learn.
Your board
You don't really come in just knowing it all.
Your policy that talks about board responsibilities starts out with the need for you to know laws, regulations, and so forth. So that could be kind of the jumping off
Also, we
point
have
for
two
the
things, we have
training.
board responsibilities and board
That
expectations.
uses the word general.
But, well, you can only run it generally, I gotta tell you.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, but getting training is important, whether it's doing this kind of thing or, going out and obviously I feel very strongly about the ASBA and spent a lot of time dealing with them. I mean, there's just a lot of really good training through the law conference and everything else and also tailored specifically to your needs as this one is. That's helpful.
This is the document that we adopted unanimously, but we definitely have talked about professionally developing. We had a fall, like we have to calendar it out, but like, let's look at a professional development plan. And are we doing any, like this is professional development. Are we doing any book talks? Like there are other ways to do not just going to conferences, like there might be other ways and we have to look at what our budget is. So we definitely, it's coming up because we put it on a future agenda.
Okay, I got 2 things and I'll get you out of here. This is your mission statement. Creighton School District educate for a diverse community of learners to be college and career ready, empowering them to contribute to their local and global communities. Great. Still think that works? Is there anything that came up tonight that, and again, I'm not asking you to do this tonight, you think about it, that isn't in here? That you talked about as things that you wanted, like for 5 years down the road, for example, or
Might be nice to have some mention of equity, because that, I mean, it's come up many times. And an understanding that, that we can be divided. And so I think maybe we might consider getting equity on there.
It's supposed to be a charity.
we've got to do the judge, I've got 2 of you in there. So let me just write after in there. And then
I mean, what do you all think?
well, that came up a lot.
I mean, I think, when we say our diverse community, I guess like I'm implying we're talking about equity. We're not talking about doing some and not others, or just the students who show up and not all the students or something. So I don't personally know that the word getting it in there helps me. I like what we're going with this mission statement. I think it would be maybe stronger with equity, but I don't think it's lacking the way it reads currently personally.
Or if we put the word entire in front of diverse, or entire diverse community,
Yeah.
that's like strengthen
That would strengthen it.
our entire diverse community of members.
When did this change to, Hilda, do you remember? Because I think when I got on, there was definitely talk about local and global citizens, but like the words college and career ready feel really new. Maybe they were there in 2008 when I became engaged. But I feel like this is a newer mission statement.
Summer 2015.
That's all right.
I don't want to be cringy or anything like that, but I consider myself in the community. And I hope I keep learning, but I am not part of your community of learners. Why are we using learners instead of students, or, to make it more specific, or are you including like community ed? I'm just wondering.
You could say young learners.
Well, I'm young too.
When I read the, I think that an aim, and maybe Eric can share, but I think it was about like our community of like teachers and educators and others. It wasn't just the students. But it does say to be college and career ready.
Yeah, you
Well,
know,
that's
and
because
that would be
the
redundant.
buzzword for 2013.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Yeah.
Given the fact that you only go up to 8th grade, does that mean that, I mean, you have to, be working with Phoenix Union?
It's just because it was the buzzword at the time, because the law was coming
Well, it's maybe something that you wanna rethink. And your vision statement?
Yeah.
Transforming, innovating, achieving excellence.
Well, real quick on the mission
Yes.
statement too, I think like there are other language in that strategic plan that I think is really valuable to capture, but like making sure students do have like, I don't know what the language is, but like self-determination, like they can actually they have the capacity and the skill set and the know-how to make informed decisions for their own life, not just be tracked into a career or college or something. So I would like to see, I mean, that might be something we add in there.
Is that a response to CTE?
Oh, I mean, it wasn't responsive to that in particular. It was just a matter of, it's not just empowering them to contribute to their local and global communities, but also to have more self-determination. I'm sure there's a more articulate way to say that.
Are you going also to be like critical thinkers?
Critical and creative thinkers
Yeah.
is, that's what I used in my campaign. I mean, it goes back to this, what we were talking about earlier, like it's not just the test scores, it's not just chasing down what the state determines is a good school because we like mastered these tests and lined the pockets of Judy's friends. But really like helping our students have, like I want them to have, like, to your point about like be ready for any school, like I want that to be their choice and not just not the high school's choice.
You're not be, you know, it's interesting with dropouts, a lot of times they can be picked out in third grade who's going to be a dropout. So there's a way to control that too. Maybe adding the word empower and educator.
Yeah. Empowers them.
Yeah, empowering them.
Oh, there we go.
But it's mostly
Actually, see, now I'd like to, this is just me probably, but like, I would like to see something in there too about not just empowering, yet like, okay, I guess it already says that, but like leadership roles and really, you know, this is their community. Like, I don't know exactly. I sometimes feel like we too often are like sitting here and we're going to bestow these things on somebody else, but instead, I'd rather, you know, like it says empower, but you know, really take on, you know, leadership roles and I don't know. I
So
don't know
maybe
how
not
to
just
put that
contribute
exactly.
to, but contribute and lead.
Empowering them.
Lead their roles. Yeah.
To lead and contribute.
Yeah.
I want to create little users.
Yeah.
Take it over.
Gives you ideas.
Yeah, oh yeah, I got it. The Creighton School District educates our entire diverse community of learners to be critical and creative thinkers, empowered to lead and contribute to their local and global communities.
This is,
Done.
Did somebody record that?
the next one, this is where I say, bring that back to me.
Yeah.
It's already.
Yeah. Okay.
Vision statement,
It's not a statement. I have a problem with that.
so it's something that you think you want to change.
And to me, like a vision statement is what's different in the world because we accomplished the mission. Like this to me is more of the verbs and like how we're getting there. So I don't know if it really, I think it captures a lot of what we're going for in our district. But I don't know if it really tells in one sentence a story of how the world is different because Creighton School District were so good at what they did.
So when you have this, where you want it, then that'll come.
Or
Usually
back
this comes first, but not always. Sometimes this is easier because it's shorter. We don't have as much wordsmithing going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate on what a vision statement really is in terms of whether it's a branding statement or, Nike just do it, It's a very interesting debate about what a vision statement is, but I think if we define it as why is the world different because of what we did, and we'll come to something. I certainly am highly attracted to transforming, but that is a process. Highly attracted to innovation. I think that leads to leadership. So somewhere in there, those phrases might fit into a vision statement, but I think that's something we'd have to go through a process on and have it pop. And maybe we can do that as part of the town hall. Just let them contribute to, what the story is behind the people who worked on that, and what might they do in their experience and in their separate worlds. Say, here's what it looks like when we do a vision statement. Maybe we can go through a process like that and be involving the community. That would be great.
Well, it's a little bit after 8. I have these evaluations that you can send in the ASBA.
Okay.
I certainly enjoyed working with you. I learned a lot, and you've got some great ideas for moving ahead on all of this stuff. Sorry when you get to beliefs, but we kind of did with the stuff that you talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was a hefty agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Some of you, at least at the law conference. And move the governing board up to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned at
Julie.
8:04.